Elizabeth Benyon, and I'm here on behalf of the American Democracy Project to Value South Bend and the League of Women Voters of the South Bend area with a candidate debate featuring state Senate candidates, incumbent Michael Bohacek and Democratic challenger Gary Davis. And today what you're going to hear is where they stand on the issues that matter to voters in Indiana and in District 8. We will start with opening statements by each candidate, followed by a series of policy questions, and finally, each candidate will have 30 seconds to tell you why he deserves your vote on or before November 3rd. Based on a coin toss, we will start first with Senator Bohacek.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Senator Mike Bohacek. I am a married father of 3 daughters, a very precocious 10-year-old, 19, and soon to be 21-year-old. I'm just finishing up my first term as a senator, and it was a very successful term. We were able to shepherd through some legislation that had been stalled in the past. One of them was near and dear to some folks' heart here in South Bend, which was the expansion of the SNAP food benefit program that former Senator Broden, now Judge Broden, tried to get moved through, and I, in fact, was able to move it. We handled bias crimes as well in the past session, but more importantly, what I had always heard from voters in the past is that they never felt that we were getting our fair share of resources in the form of money coming up north. And we remedied that during this session. I was able to bring in excess of $500 million in new monies into the district. So we've been very successful, and I would appreciate to be able to do that in the upcoming session as well.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
Hi, my name is Gary Davis. You probably know me as the Davis Disability Group. I've been a Social Security disability lawyer here for a long time. I'm married to my wife of 38 years, Dana, and I have 2 adult children, Ben and Jacqueline. I live on a small farm in northern LaPorte County. I'm here to advocate for teachers and school funding. I'm also here to advocate for workers. I've been representing mentally and physically disabled workers my entire career and people injured in Indiana workers' compensation benefits. The pendulum has swung too far the other way, and it needs to go back in the middle. I'm here to stand for those principles, and I'd like to say that I appreciate the League of Women Voters, IUSB, and the people here at WNIT for putting us on and for giving Mr. Bohacek and I the chance to talk about issues. I also would like to say that I heard what Mr. Bohacek said about bringing $500 million back here, and there has been some great developments with the South Shore Railroad and other things in northern Indiana, but it was the work of a whole lot of people, Republicans and Democrats, a bipartisan approach, and by a lot of non-elected officials, and I hope you consider that today as we go through this debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question will go first to you, Senator Bohacek, and it is: elected officials provide or have an opportunity to be proactive on issues that they really care about. So if reelected, what are 1 or 2 issues that you'd really like to tackle in 2021?
Sure. What I've seen, and in my last session, in particular, we were addressing some prescription drug cost issues. We were able to get a piece of some legislation moved through to add some transparency, but true transparency of the actual cost structure and how that works through the drug supply chain is absolutely key. During our research, we saw that in many cases we're seeing markups of 3, 4, and 5 times wholesale cost. On formularies, we're seeing a rebating scheme where a consumer is charged, in some cases, $300 or $400 more for the drug, and then the insurance company is getting a rebate back. So we need to seriously focus on drug prices.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, the same question to you. What would be an issue or 2 that you really would want to prioritize?
A couple issues for me are teachers pay. We have some of the lowest teacher pay in the country. Funding per student is some of the lowest in the country, and our educational system is suffering. Our children are suffering as a result of that. So certainly school funding, and there's money available for that, and there's ways of accomplishing that. The other thing is healthcare costs. Right now, the state of Indiana is pursuing with a number of other states ending the Affordable Care Act 1 week after the election. The Supreme Court of the United States will hear this issue, and if they're successful, everyone here will lose their health insurance, even though the Attorney General, the Governor, state reps, and the state senators are all having taxpayer-provided health insurance. That's wrong, and it shouldn't be.
Senator Bohacek, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, and to touch on his health insurance question, we passed legislation in the budget to protect pre-existing conditions in the event that that the Affordable Care Act was repealed, and that was a key piece to get put in the budget so we could get those folks some protections. As far as repealing that and that fight to end the AHC participation, that's an Attorney General issue. That was not a legislative action that we voted on and directed him to do that. He was acting on his own.
Thank you. The next question will go first to you, Gary Davis. It is, how will you communicate with your constituency to make sure that you represent the people in your district instead of just towing the party line?
Thank you for the question. One of the things that I'd like to do and proposed in my materials that I plan to do is have a dedicated state Senate office in 3340 Monroe Street in LaPorte, Indiana. I think it's important to have town hall meetings quarterly throughout the district and to have bi-monthly meetings where we can have open houses where people can come and talk. Obviously during COVID that's going to be difficult, but when COVID is over, and it will be over, I like the old school method of meeting with people, talking with them, maybe meeting with a group of police officers, a group of farmers, a group of teachers, and working on those things. And I would also like to say that I'd much rather have more time to listen to constituents that way than have the lobbyists have my ear in Indianapolis. That's not a good thing when the lobbyists have more of your time than your constituents do.
Thank
you. Senator Bohacek, same question.
Sure. Throughout the course of the year, you're meeting with constituents, either in formal and informal settings, events like this, third house sessions with the chambers, and then also, well, we do a lot of virtual communication because a lot of folks just can't get the time off of work to come to an evening event. And that works out extremely well, and this way we're able to just get some good solid listening time. And if you look at my voting record, I don't vote party line. I've carried bills that have been, Democrat stalwarts that have never gotten passed, and I've passed them. So, I vote my district, and that's the way I've always been. And that is true to reasoning because I'm endorsed by the trade unions, and I'm endorsed by the Indiana State Teachers Association that represents 44,000 educators throughout the state. I'm the only Republican endorsed by them.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, 30 seconds.
I would also say that I've been endorsed by the American Federation of Teachers and other trade unions and been supported by them. I think the issue, though, I'd like to go back to is what Mr. Bohacek said about the ACA and his amendment to not stop pre-existing conditions. The problem with that is, and I appreciate the thought, I think he did a right thing and a good thing. I'm not challenging what he did. But fundamentally, legally speaking, that'll make no difference if the ACA is ruled by the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional. No funding, no insurance for anyone a week after the election.
Now, the 8th district includes Potato Creek State Park, and it also includes fish and wildlife areas and many acres of prime farmland. So how will you work to preserve these areas and protect the environment in situations where state government has some authority? We'll go first to you, Mr. Bohacek.
Well, farmland preservation has always been an issue for the Farm Bureau, and certainly we're gonna try to keep those lands open and in production when possible. But in most cases, those are local decisions. Potato Creek State Park is actually we are studying the opportunity to put a hotel in that area. That was some legislation that was brought forth by Representative Deal, and I carried it forward in the Senate for them, just to be able to try to get some more traffic in there and get some more awareness. The DNR does a great job of enforcing our laws throughout the remaining wildlife lands we have. I know there was a push to try to do some logging in the yellow forest in the southern part of the state, and I voted against that as well. So it's important that we have our natural lands and areas open and available for the future generations.
Thank you. Gary Davis.
My response is we have some amazing state parks and local parks in our communities. We need to protect them. I feel like there can be a balance between the farmer's interest and the interest of those state parks. But we have some beautiful parks, and I would do everything I could to protect the environment, not only as far as state parks, but our air, water, all those things are big issues with me.
Thank you. Senator Bohacek, 30 seconds.
You know, and like I said, a lot of the farmland preservation stuff, we don't get a lot of encroachment issues. Now, something I am involved with an organization that deals with issues around the Great Lakes, and we are trying to educate our farmers on excess nutrient runoff, over fertilization, which is causing some algae blooms. We see it here in St. Joe County. You'll see it in Lake Michigan as well, and also some of our smaller lakes. So where we can, we're trying to do what we can to keep things where they need to be.
Thank you. The next question will go first to Mr. Davis. What do you see as the state's primary fiscal challenge given the effects of COVID-19, and how will you work to address this challenge?
Well, the fiscal challenge is there, obviously, and COVID's created it. I think there's some things, though, that are available right now. The first stimulus money, I think there's still $1.4 billion that's available that hasn't been spent. It needs to be spent by the end of the year, and local governments could use that money now. I believe the federal government, despite what you might see on television or read, will eventually assist the states again, and I think we should use that money to support where necessary. I think for the schools themselves, there is a funding program that was suggested by the Indiana Democratic senators, and it's a good program. It would provide $100 million more a year for teacher salary and teachers funding by increasing the amortization of the 1996 retirement fund issue. So by that, if you extend it out from 2040 to 2045, you add $100 million a year for the next 5 years that'd be available for teachers' compensation. That's what I think.
Thank you. Senator Bohacek.
You know, the COVID has certainly put up a big strain on the budget. Thankfully, and I know my opponent in questions that he had in Vote 411 questionnaire is not in favor of the surplus that we carried, or we carried, because the vast majority of it's gone. It looks like we will go into the start of the new year with about $500 million. Works out to about 2.5 weeks worth of bills. And the more important thing is for our locals and for the state is, although this year our income tax collections were pretty good, they were based off of last year's revenue. So we know that you know, in the 2021 year, it's going to be a real difficult revenue time, and our budget this year is going to reflect that. As far as pushing back the amortization, that basically means we're going to kick that can forward on fully funding our teachers' pensions, and there's interest expense involved with that. And you know, pushing that bill forward to give it to another generation is just not what we need to be doing.
Mr. Davis, care to respond?
Yeah. I've been a businessman for 30 plus years. I know what it means to make payroll, to make my expenses, and pay my bills. This stretching of that 5 additional years is a common practice in business and industry. You refinance, it's just like your home. You extend the mortgage payments out, the bill's paid, it does get resolved, there's no risk to teachers or the teachers' pension fund. However, it allows $100 million a year to be freed up for our teachers, and they're in a crisis right now. They need compensation.
Thank you. The next question will go first to you, Senator Bohacek. What can state government do to attract more businesses to District 8, and what kinds of businesses would you like to see in your district?
You know, we're looking for more upskilled businesses, and you know, we do have a list, you know, and DWD has provided this, which is a high need, you know, jobs that are going to pay the growing wage that we need. You know, we have a real robust suite of incentive programs to try to get businesses here, but you know, we need to start looking more at you know, a tech kind of sector. You know, we do really well on the manufacturing side in the 8th district, but we need to start getting some, you know, some additional white collar positions available so we can start retaining some of our local talent. And to do that, we're going to need to do something with our housing stock. We do have an aging housing stock, and to try to continue to develop the quality of place of which this district is. We have a lot of assets here, and we need to promote those assets and fully develop them.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
Well, I guess my thought is that in Indiana, there's been a pendulum that swung way to the side of corporations and businesses. Indiana's a business-friendly state. We don't need to do more to attract businesses. I think what we need to do is focus on our workers, their education, unionization. I think we also need to focus on minimum wage, a living wage for people, and we also need to focus on workers' compensation. You know, the workers' compensation premiums, it's told the corporations, one of the reasons they come to Indiana, very low premiums because the benefits are low. If you're a middle-aged person, you have a work injury that's career-altering or career-ending, the benefits are terrible. Indiana is one of the lowest states in the country as far as workers' compensation. So I believe the focus should be placed back on the worker, elevating the worker, and I think if we do that, our economy will grow. There's too much focus on the business, not enough focus on the worker, in my opinion, in Indiana.
Senator Bohacek, 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I appreciate his opinion, but you know, in order to grow the economy and to grow wages, we have to create a need for labor. And because when you have a higher demand for anything, the price is going to rise to attract that talent, and that's going to be a good way to do it. We already have the opportunity to unionize. That's already a right, and we have a fair number of folks that exercise that right, and I'm happy for them. But I get a little bit confused at times of Mr. Davis's position, even on specifically with employees and employee relations with their employers.
All right, since you did specifically say you're confused for position, maybe we could each have 10 seconds.
I don't know how to respond in 10 seconds to the question. I've had employees my entire career. I own my business, but I'm saying we have to elevate workers, and by elevating workers, everybody will be elevated, the businesses as well. That's my point.
I can only answer from what I've heard Mr. Davis say before is he would be in favor of removing the employment at will statute in Indiana. That would make us the only state in the country that would not have employment at will. So I don't know how you're going to manage that, but that was something that he spoke about in the past as well.
Now, what should state government role be in health care? And what is your plan to help Hoosiers gain access to better, more affordable health care? Is there a need there for our state? And if so, what kind of change would you like to see? Mr. Davis.
I like to look at other places and see what they've done. The state of Massachusetts has one of the best healthcare programs going, and almost everyone is covered under their health insurance program. And by the way, it was a bipartisan plan. Governor Romney was a Republican who was in charge of the state and worked with a Democratic, deep blue state in Massachusetts, very Democratic, and they came up with a healthcare plan that worked for everyone. Bipartisan, they got it done, and everybody's insured. Today, if you go to Massachusetts, they're not supporting this lawsuit to end the Affordable Care Act. They don't want that to happen. And right now, the most popular person in the state of Massachusetts is Governor Baker, a Republican, because he's bipartisan, he's working across party lines, and they're concerned about health care. We need to have affordable health care for everyone. And if this thing happens in the Supreme Court a week late after the election, we're all going to be in a crisis as far as health care.
Senator Bohacek?
Yes, so Indiana does have one of the highest costs of care in the country, and it's a concern. We've been meeting summer study sessions again this year for it and trying to address it. The problem we have is competition. We don't have a lot of competition on the healthcare front. We have 3 or 4 major providers of hospital services. We have basically 2 players in the insurance marketplace, Anthem and Cigna. So with very little competition, there's just not the incentive to contain costs. Something we are looking at doing, and I'm working on legislation right now, is to allow cross-border use of state Medicaid. So when we have kids that live in the district and would be referred down to Riley's in Indianapolis for issues, right now they have to go to Riley's. Well, we're trying to work a pilot where they could go to University of Chicago Healthcare or also to Lowry's children at Northwestern, just so these families don't have to drive 3.5 hours with a sick kid. So we're addressing as best we can, but it's a big lift, and there's a lot going on with it.
Mr. Davis, 30 seconds.
My response is still the same. There's bipartisan ways of getting things done. The state of Indiana doesn't have to have this terrible situation with health insurance. Premiums people can't afford. Sometimes we stereotype and we think, oh, this only applies to poor people or people with lower incomes. This problem with the ACA is going to affect everyone. If you have a person in your family, a loved one, pre-existing condition, it's going away. Indiana should not be one of the states pursuing this. And if you're voting for Attorney General or Governor, think about it when you go in that voting booth.
Thank you. The next question will go first to you, Senator Bohacek. What would you do to ensure that Indiana's K-12 students get the best education possible? Are there any changes you would like to see to the state's education policy?
Sure. Everybody wants to see more money go in K-12. I'm no different. But resources are limited. Right now, K-12 gets about 52% of the budget, and it grows every year. In the last budget, they were able to whether we were able to put in close to $900 million additional dollars into K-12. We need, there's never enough money for K-12. I think we need to focus on, though, is making sure that those new dollars are driving right into the classroom, that they're not going into, a bloated administration where we're having, student populations decrease, teacher headcount decrease, and administrator headcount increase. And that's the key, is just making sure that those dollars are driven to the right place. Because in some cases, in a lot of cases, that's not the situation.
Mr. Davis, what changes would you like to see, and how do we pay for it?
Well, the changes would be a focus on teachers, elevating teachers. The most important relationship growing up for me was the teacher-student. I had a teacher in high school, Michigan City High School. His name is Bruce Fisher, high school teacher and coach. It's an amazing relationship. I think many of you, if you think about it, there's some teacher that impacted your life and caused a change in direction in your life. The funding I've already talked about, the money's there, refinance, $100 million a year is available. The other thing we need to focus on and talk about are vouchers. Vouchers take $150 million, I think, this year away from our public schools. And charter schools, they're public schools, but what is the value to us as far as in public education? We need to go back to the fundamentals of focusing on public education.
Mr. Bohacek, 30 seconds.
Well, about the voucher program and the charter schools, everybody has an opinion on that, but I would bet that many of the folks that send their kids there will probably have a different opinion than Mr. Davis. The only way I know how to raise money for public education, there's only two ways you can really do it that could be self-sustaining and move forward. You either have to raise revenue or cut the revenue from somebody else. So where do you want to make the cuts, and for how long? And I think that's the key that Mr. Davis doesn't speak about. It's just wishful thinking.
So as a follow-up question then, Mr. Davis, what would be the best way to attract and retain the kind of good teachers that you were talking about?
Again, I don't want to repeat myself too often, but that $100 million is available by simply refinancing. It's a simple procedure. But let's go to teachers. If you're, my kids are both out of college now and have graduated, but if you're a parent, would you recommend your child become a teacher in the state of Indiana right now? No, the compensation is bad. I've talked to teachers that are 3, 5, 6 years into it, and they're basically the starting teacher's salary. You would suggest they go into engineering or science or some other area, because we need to make teaching attractive again for everyone. We need to place a priority on making teaching attractive, and the money is available. We could find it if we look hard enough.
Senator Bohacek.
Your local school boards set the pay scale. We don't do it at the state level. We give them money, we set aside incentive programs, and we give them new dollars as it becomes available. But they determine what they're going to pay their teachers and what they're not going to pay their teachers. And we've seen instances, in certainly in South Bend schools, where they had significant money sitting in cash reserves, and the teachers weren't getting raises. Why? These are the questions that we have to look at, and we have to drill down to the district level and make sure that our districts are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And compensating the teachers is a big piece of that. And we go back to the same situation again. New monies need to be driven into the classroom. The school boards need to be held accountable for that, and also the administration. And if we do those things, that money is there. It just needs to be put in the right place.
Mr. Davis, 30 seconds.
Again, I think the issue is not necessarily, obviously if there's waste, we should cut that. That's certainly an obligation we have. But we have to make the teaching profession attractive again for people. And one of the bottom line things you're considering is compensation. And school corporations do make the decision, but it's based on the funding they have from the state. We have to increase the funding to the schools to solve the problem as far as funding to the teachers.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Senator Bohacek. What is your position on no excuse vote by mail? Do you think that legislation should be passed to adopt it in the state of Indiana, or are you satisfied with the current rules? And Are there any other changes that you would like to see in our election laws?
Sure. I've authored and co-authored several bills on gerrymandering. I know that's a big topic for a lot of folks, especially this time of year. We've gotten them through the Senate before, but just couldn't get them across the House. I served on elections for 2 years, and that was an issue we were always dealing with. You know, I want to see voters come out and turn out. I do. I want to make registration as easy as possible, and I've been supportive of virtually anything that expands the access to the ballot box for our locals, because we need people civically engaged. We have to. So whatever we can do to improve that is key. Now, something I will be working on this session is we saw this in St. Joe County, where the town of North Liberty is not going to have a polling place, which to me is disenfranchising. These folks are going to have to drive 5, 10, 15 miles in order to vote in person, and that's wrong. So I will be drafting legislation that all municipal, any incorporated municipality must have a vote center in the boundaries.
So just to clarify, no excuse absentee would be one of those changes you would consider voting for?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Mr. Davis.
My answer would be the same. I think we should encourage people to vote as much as possible. I served on the LaPorte County Election Board for a number of years. Prior to that, for a number of years, I was the assistant to the election board. There was not a problem with fraud from mail-in voting or any other fraud that I saw. What we did see periodically were mistakes, clerical errors, mistakes people made. And I worked closely with Ralph Howes, was the Republican appointee to the election board, and we always worked to see that people's votes were counted. And I think mail-in voting in a pandemic only makes common sense. So am I open to getting people to vote whatever's the easiest and best way for them and the most convenient? I'd say yes. The only thing I'd like to tell you today is whichever way you do it, please vote.
Senator Bohacek, 30 seconds.
I think we're in concurrence on this issue. There's really not really much to talk about. It's just important that we just allow people the best access they have. And with no excuse absentee voting, let's be really honest, a lot of people are just falsifying the form anyway, which why make people do that? It's kind of ridiculous. So
if they don't feel comfortable going to the polls, they'll check any box and it's
anyway.
not validated.
So why bother doing that? Just give them the option to not have to.
Okay, thank you. The next question goes first to Mr. Davis. Please state your position on the county enterprise zone, being developed in the new Carlisle area. How should communities balance the need for jobs and industrial development with environmental concerns? So specifically on the IEC.
Well, to answer the question, I think that we have to always have a balance between industry and environment. I think that's key in every case. Although I don't think, I believe there should be that enterprise zone, and I do think the industry should be allowed to move in there. I know there was discussion of Toyota at one point moving into that area, and I think there's still a possibility that Toyota would move into that area, and that'd be wonderful for our area. The jobs are good paying. It would certainly lift people up. So yes, there has to be a balance. You have to protect the environment. You also have to encourage businesses to come, so I don't have a problem with that.
Senator Bohacek?
Yeah, that's less of a. There's a couple of issues with that project. First of all, the decision making wasn't necessarily as transparent as it should have been, and I think that was a real problem for the folks in New Carlisle, because I spoke with a lot of them about it. And the environmental concerns aren't probably as big of an issue, because right now that land is under production as farmland. So our farmland preservation people are concerned about that as well. But for the people in New Carlisle, it's a quality of place issue. They feel that the industrial park and industrial activity that is there now is sufficient, and they don't want to become, the next big industrial park sponsor, with the town just kind of having to deal with, the aftermath of that. So yes, we have to balance it out, but you have to take real hard concern of those local property owners and those residents, because if you don't, it's just going to fail.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, 30 seconds.
I really don't have much of a rebuttal. Certainly you don't want to take the local interests into account, and you want to make a decision based on that. But I think the opportunity for the area and the people in this area, it's great, and we need to consider that as well.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Senator Bohacek. The northern border of the 8th District is also the Indiana-Michigan border. What kinds of collaboration do you think that our state could do a better job of with other states, whether that's environmental, financial, infrastructure, emergency planning, public health? I don't know, which seems most important to you and like we could be doing more?
You know, we do collaborate with emergency services. I live on a community that's, the border is, 600 feet from my front door. So we do get collaboration on public safety. We monitor each other's frequencies on the police frequencies, and also for fire as well. It's hard because when we're talking about nutrient management for farm issues, that becomes a watershed issue. So we are trying to get some cross-border collaboration, and the Great Lakes Basin Committee that I sit on, it tries to address some of those issues. But we also have some laws that are that don't line up. Legalized cannabis. It's still illegal in the state of Indiana. If you test positive and you're involved in a car accident, you're going to be charged. As you're intoxicated, whether it's not your fault or not. So we need to get some cohesiveness with some of our legislation, but it's tough to do.
Mr. Davis.
Almost in the same situation. Our farm is 7/10 of a mile from the Michigan state line. The closest town to my farm by far is Three Oaks, Michigan. So we're there a lot, and we see a lot of the things they've done. A couple things that I would love to see us collaborate on. Michigan, through a bipartisan method, has come up with a civil commission to get rid of gerrymandering. In other words, nonpartisan civil commission, they draw the boundaries, and it's working, and it was bipartisan. So there's an example of a place that I think we should collaborate and pay attention. Another thing is the minimum wage. Some people think, hey, you're proposing minimum wage, $7.25 this year, $15 January 1st an hour. I'm not proposing that, but Michigan has a good example of that. They're doing a progressive minimum wage increase over time. I think it's $9.75 an hour now, or somewhere in that range. So there's a lot of good ideas from looking at other states, and we're so close to Michigan in this district, we certainly should be looking.
Thank you. 30 seconds?
Sure. When we touch on minimum wage, and I know that's something that Mr. Davis is pretty passionate about, if you look at the average wage for the lowest skilled workers, which are typically our food service worker, the average wage is just under $10 an hour organically right now, just because the way the industry is and the job market is. So my concern is if we start scaling up the minimum wage too much or too robustly, we could end up ending employment opportunities for our young kids, our 16, 17, 18-year-olds that need to work and to learn that good work ethic. So that's certainly a potential downside for it.
Now, speaking of cross-state competition and collaboration, Senator Bohacek already mentioned this issue, the issue of marijuana and having different laws in Michigan than in Indiana. So starting first with you, Mr. Davis, what is your position on the legalization or decriminalization of marijuana in the state of Indiana for either or medicinal purposes or recreational purposes or both?
Sure. I believe that in Indiana, marijuana should be decriminalized. I think it takes up too much of our court time, our jail time, and it certainly damages lives. Young person caught with marijuana, possession of marijuana, goes to jail, loses their job. There's no value in it. We need to decriminalize marijuana so people are not going to jail for that issue. The other thing is, I'm licensed in Indiana to practice law, and disability law is what I do, but I'm also licensed in Michigan, and I've been representing disabled people in Michigan for a long time. So I think there's a definite need for medical marijuana in our state. Some of my clients say it works, it's always a doctor-patient issue, and I think that's where it should be. But some of the doctors, it works, and their patient, it works for them, some does not. But I think the people in Indiana deserve that option. Medical marijuana has helped a number of my clients. Some it has no value to them at all. But those two things, I would say, decriminalizing marijuana and medical marijuana, I don't believe our state is ready for recreational marijuana. At least from the people I talk to, I don't think that's true.
So just to clarify then, legalization of medical marijuana, yes, and decriminalization of recreational marijuana.
Right. If you have possession of marijuana, decriminalize that, but people should, through their doctor, get a prescription, should be entitled to have medical marijuana, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Bohacek.
Sure. I've already been on the record in support of medical marijuana. It's a good alternative for pain management. I could get behind recreational marijuana, but we don't have an actual good standard as to what is intoxicated. It's not, how many nanograms of active metabolite do you have in your system that determines that you're in fact intoxicated. And we don't have a good field test that's accurate that can, help us enforce our traffic laws. So that becomes even a secondary issue. In order to really get a harsh penalty, I sit on criminal law and corrections, and I'm not a lawyer, but in order to get a harsh penalty for marijuana, which would be a felony, you have to be in possession of 3 ounces or more. That's an awful lot of marijuana. This is not just, personal consumption amounts. That's something that rises well and beyond that. So I think our current laws, the way they are written, are sufficient, and we need to enforce them and make sure that they're treated fairly, and all people are treated fairly under that, under our judicial system.
So legalization of medical marijuana and keep recreational marijuana illegal for now.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Davis, 30 seconds.
Again, I've seen lives damaged over the course of my career from being convicted of crimes, particularly possession of marijuana, that I don't think help anyone. It doesn't benefit. I think if you talk to police officers, prosecutors, they don't want to spend their time and effort to do that. They have too many other more important things to do. So I think decriminalization of marijuana is a good thing, and medical marijuana for sure is a good thing.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Senator Bohacek. What ideas do you have to reduce the total number of gun-related deaths in the state of Indiana? How can we best prevent homicides, suicides, and accidental deaths involving firearms?
Sure. We just closed a loophole. It was actually my legislation on this past session. So up until this year, a youthful offender who was adjudicated as a delinquent, which means they're charged as a juvenile, if they committed a serious violent felony with a firearm, and they can't have a firearm anyway because they're under 18, so if they committed a violent felony with a firearm, when they turn 18 in a day, they can go to the gun store and legally buy a firearm. We wanted to close that loophole. So what we did is we put a mandatory 8 or 10-year waiting period. So if the adult statute would have been a felony 1 or 2, it's a mandatory 10-year waiting period. If it's a felony 3 down to 6, it would be a mandatory 8-year waiting period. But then the possession by a felon statute on the adult side would pick up. So in the event that they were found in possession of the gun, then that would be an issue. I've never had a problem with additional background checks at gun show sales. I think that would certainly help as well.
So another loophole to close.
Correct.
Mr. Davis.
Yes, I believe in the Second Amendment. On our farm, I'm not a hunter, but I have friends that hunt my farm regularly. I think people should possess guns for recreational purposes and for hunting purposes. I think, though, kind of another issue that came to my mind, it's a little off subject, so I don't know if you want to respond to it or not, but suicide, I've had it happen to my clients over the years. It's a big issue to me. It really is kind of a passion for me. Guns are one of the things used for suicide, but there's a number of other things. We have some great mental health agencies around. Oak Lawn, Swanson Center, Porter Stark Services, the Bowen Center, 4 County Counseling. They all do an amazing job. Somehow we need to provide more support for them. I apologize if that's not directly, but suicide is just such an issue that it concerns me. So that's the reason I responded that way.
But no specific laws that you'd like to change at this time?
I think that currently our laws are sufficient as far as I'm concerned, as far as gun control. Eventually, no, I think they're sufficient as they stand right now.
Thank you. 30 seconds, Mr.
Sure.
Bohacek.
And I'm a big advocate of the Second Amendment as well. I'm a firearm owner and a hunter, just like probably many in the state. But the state of Indiana has one of the most robust red flag laws in the country, which means that if somebody is having some mental issues, a family member could report, and the officers, public safety, could remove the firearms from the home, and then also they would be on the NICS reporting list, so they just couldn't go out and buy another one until they had a court hearing to determine if they were in fact competent. So we've got some really good progressive ideas to try to limit some of these things. So.
Thank you. The next question is about the issue of SNAP. One of the things that we have seen during the pandemic is that our agencies have really stepped up to make SNAP available, food assistance, nutrition assistance, to more people. Is there Are there any changes that you'd like to see long-term beyond what you've already done?
I mean, I grew up on food stamps as a kid, so I'm pretty familiar with the program. I was able to get the food stamp program extended out to convicted drug felons up until 2 years ago. Actually, this is the first year that it became effective, that a convicted drug felon could not receive at a lifetime ban in the state of Indiana for food stamps, which to me was just ridiculous. And we had some local folks here that were really fighting to get this done. And and that expansion was good. I'd like to see, obviously, we would all like to see more dollars being put into that food stamp bucket. Perhaps even raising the eligibility, the income eligibility for food stamps. No, but nobody should be going to bed hungry at night, and nobody should be food insecure.
Thank you.
I would agree with what Mr. Bohacek said. No one should go to bed hungry. We have enough in this country to make sure that everybody has enough to eat. And if we could expand the SNAP program or add more money to it, I think that's a great thing. My wife just mentioned to me a couple days ago, she was in LaPorte and drove by one of the churches, and they had a food pantry giveaway, and a lot of businesses and churches are doing this. It's a wonderful thing. She said it was like Disney World. People were lined up so many places and out on the road. People are struggling. People are in economic crisis right now, and we need to do everything we can to serve them. And like I say, many of the charitable agencies are really stepping up and helping out, but it is frightening when you see that, to see how desperate people are really right now just for food alone.
Thank you. 30 seconds?
Yeah, real quickly. I think what we also need to touch on too, and try to incent, we're very good about incenting new employers and new manufacturers to come here, but we have parts of the state and parts of our own district here that there's no availability of good, fresh food. We have food deserts. You've heard the term a lot. Well, we need to start incenting, grocery stores, supermarkets start closing in those areas that are underserved, so that somebody's not purchasing their groceries at a corner store or at a gas station where it's overpriced and not necessarily as healthy as it should be for them.
And just really quickly, what would be an incentive that the state government could do?
Sure, we could do tax credit programs for it. We could assist some offset in property tax abatements. We could do some sales tax issues. There's things we could do if we're going to try to close that loophole, but we also need the locals to engage as well.
That is actually my next question, and it will go first to you, Mr. Davis. Where would you like to see the state government working more closely with local government, and how would you do that if you're elected?
I guess my first thought comes to my mind are the schools and teachers, and if there's any kind of a liaison there, that would be very helpful. I do also believe, going back to that issue of mental health issues, I do believe liaisons between our, like I already mentioned, wonderful mental health agencies and our local law enforcement. It seems like to me that a lot of times an officer is called to a scene when there is a mental health crisis. And I've dealt with these people over the years because they've helped my clients who are in mental health crisis resolve peacefully without harming someone. So obviously the police have to be in control, and the officer has to make the call if he thinks it would help to have a mental health person there. But some sort of liaison and additional support from the state for mental health agencies, and increase that liaison relationship between our local law enforcement and our mental health agencies.
Thank you. Senator Bohacek?
Well, I mean, if we want to talk about how we integrate with local governments, our locals ask us to pass laws for them to clarify things all the time. And then we also deal with constituent issues where, we have problems with annexation, forced annexation of lands out in the county where folks need some clarity and some assistance with it. We work with our locals all of the time, and sometimes we have to provide them guardrails. And that's another piece that the legislature does. So let me give you an example. So we had this. We've been hearing some conversation about the defunding the police movements throughout the country, and we've had some in the state as well. And that's a guardrail that we need to put around some of the locals, so that doesn't become an issue. Because we have more important things at the local level right now to be worried about, as opposed to putting this new political bargaining chip in place. So that's just an example of some of the things that we do. So we not only assist them, but we also help give them some guidance and knock down some barriers for them too, to try to make things a little bit more streamlined.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, 30 seconds if you need it.
The only thing I would say about defunding the police is, no one I know, I certainly don't believe in it. I used to be a deputy prosecutor. I rode with police officers The man who hired me, Walter Skip Chapala, said, Gary, if you want to be a good deputy prosecutor, ride with a police officer on a Friday night or Saturday night. I did that once a month for the period of time I was a deputy prosecutor, and I observed some terrible things police officers had to face. So I don't know of anyone talking about defunding the police, certainly no Democrats or Republicans that I'm talking to.
Thank you. The next question is about college affordability, and it goes first to you, Mr. Davis. How would you make college more affordable to Hoosiers? Do you support free public college for all citizens? If so, how would you pay for it? If not, what could we do?
I guess I would say, first of all, that I benefited. I'm a graduate of Indiana University at South Bend. I was able to work part-time, go to school, get my teaching degree. My wife graduated from Purdue North Central, where she was able to work part-time and get her teaching degree. I think, given the current economic climate, I think it would be difficult to provide free education. I don't see how that's actually possible, given the current economic climate. But I think if the economy improves, if things get better, it's certainly something we should work for, because it's an amazing gift to people in this area. The local community college, Ivy Tech, IUSB, PNC, anywhere where you can get a reduced cost, affordable education, and in my opinion, just as good as quality as any education around.
Senator Bohacek.
Sure. We already have a lot of programs available to help folks that are that are income challenged. A lot of the communities, I know Michigan City does, for instance, they provide tuition assistance for students that graduate from the public school system. We have the 21st Century Scholarship Grant. We have programs for people that want to enter the teaching profession. You can go to Ivy Tech and get a free certificate. We have places and programs already available to upskill. People just have to utilize them. And when they don't utilize them, I mean, the money's there. There's no reason why they shouldn't. Nobody who truly wants to upskill, should use these programs, because there's really no excuse not to. Money is not a barrier.
Mr. Davis?
I think that the community, the local college, is a key to the future for a lot of our students. One of my closest friends teaches at Purdue Northwest, which is now Purdue North Central, it used to be. It's available, and people should consider it and give it every opportunity. The future, we certainly should look at reducing those costs and making it available to anybody that wants to. If you want private education, you want Notre Dame, you want Valparaiso, that certainly is your choice. But our public education at the post-secondary level should be available for everyone.
Thank you. This next question goes first to Senator Bohacek, and it follows up on a point you just made, which is there are a lot of programs available that many Hoosiers don't take advantage of, perhaps because they don't know about them. Is there something that state government could do to get the citizens of the state more engaged and more informed in terms of knowing what's happening in state government and in the legislature and what programs there are to take advantage of?
Yeah, and that's a problem that we have, because how do you market this basket of services that are available to our constituents, because we don't really have a marketing budget for all of these things. So you provide them on websites, you try to do press releases, we try to announce things, to try to get it out into the community. And that's a challenge I think every state is faced with, and even our local communities are faced with it. I mean, we have township trustees, but nobody, a lot of folks don't even know what they do, because they've never had to interact with them before. I think that's a problem that all states face, and even industries face it too, just trying to get the word out. The state has a good website. You can search what you're looking for, even just on a general browser search, and probably find some stuff that the state would be able to assist you with. But it's a tough one to challenge, and it's a hard thing to get the word out at times.
Mr. Davis.
I guess I just want to give you a specific example in my life. Again, I'm a disability lawyer. I represent disabled people. But one of the great programs the state has that I don't think enough people know about is Indiana Vocational Rehabilitation. Oftentimes, our clients come to us and maybe are not completely disabled, and we try to refer them to the Indiana Voc Rehab, and they do a wonderful job of trying to get people back in the workforce, helping them recover. How to make that knowledgeable to people, I guess what Mr. Bohacek is saying would be true. Websites, more advertising, those kind of things. Because also food insecurity, a lot of our clients are there lack of housing. But to me, just the prime example to me that we've experienced at Indiana Voc Rehab, a great program, but not enough people know about it, and they should. It really could help people get back into a career, back to work.
Mr. Bohacek, 30 seconds anyway to get more people to look at those websites.
Yeah. Well, that was a great 40-second advertisement for Indiana Voc Rehab. Yeah, I think what we really need to do is, it's just, I mean, people have to take some initiative to try to see what's out there. You know, we really can't spoon feed every program to every person. I think that would be an impossible task, because we do look at the programs and see, you know, we've set this bucket of money aside in the budget, and we see that it wasn't exhausted. I mean, we looked at On My Way Pre-K when we did it as a pilot, and we had St. Joe County was one of the pilot counties, and at the end of the pilot, we still had $5 million unspent, which was really, really disappointing, because it was something that's so vital, so important.
Something that community organizations and groups can step in and help with that. Now, the next question will go first to you, Mr. Davis, and it is about a point that Senator Bohacek raised earlier, which is the question of gerrymandering. Yes. The legislature chose not to send a vote to the House floor or to vote on this in either chamber in terms of the issue of creating an independent redistricting commission. Should partisanship be part of drawing those district lines, or should there be some change in the state law to make it so that the legislature cannot take into account partisanship when drawing those district lines?
Well, I think Mr. Bohacek and I might be in agreement on this one as well. I'm certainly opposed to gerrymandering. I think a civil commission, I think Michigan just did it recently, and it works. It's successful. And you know, the funny thing about gerrymandering is, if you look at District 8, for example, it's crazy, all the lines drawn everywhere. But you know, the thing about it is, the party in power right now, that's the Republican Party. I think the idea of gerrymandering is to get one more district that goes our way, or one more. The ultimate thing that happens is you make safe districts for Democrats as well by doing that. And I think the real problem is either party suffers with gerrymandering. It's not a good idea. And if you're a new person, young person with ideas, wants to come up through the system, run for office, if you're a person in a safe district, how do you ever get a chance to voice those ideas or spread those? So I'm certainly in favor of a civil commission, and I applaud Mr. Bohacek for trying to do that. I just wonder why the Republican majority in the House wouldn't do that. Thank you.
Senator Bohacek.
Well, I guess we can ask the Democrats in Illinois why they won't do it either. So, but you know, and even trying to get a civil commission in place that's truly nonpartisan is going to be tough, because everybody comes to the table with some political ideology. We know that. But the purpose of drawing the districts is to try to, it's more than just trying to balance R's and D's, because R's and D's change all the time. Every primary you get a new shuffle of the deck. So you're trying to find some commonality of place and community. So, you know, it would be weird to have, you know, somebody, if you took a pie slice into the middle of South Bend and combined it with a bunch of rural area, it would be tough to try to balance representing these just really areas that are just kind of non-congruent. So that you get some pretty weird looking lines sometimes, but we're also trying to split them on townships and town boundaries and some other issues. But it's difficult. You know, you could make everything completely even, but my district would, well, this district is actually pretty even anyway, but you know, you'd have districts that would, you know, that would go out 40, 50 miles in the middle of Indianapolis just to get a piece of the pizza cut out of the center of the town. I mean, there's ways we can do this, but.
Lots of different things to consider, but for now, not moving forward in 2021, or will you try again? You
know what? I'll author it again like I have in the past. Whether it gets a hearing, or the chairman of elections, Greg Walker, does an excellent job on this, and he's a big advocate of district reform. And he had a really good bill last year, and he had a good one the year before that too. And I pulled mine back and co-authored with him, because he did a really nice job. It's just trying to get it moved through the other side. We passed him out of the Senate.
So it sounds like you would also pursue that legislation if you were elected, Mr. Davis?
I would. I think it's valuable. I think it matters for everyone, not just the party that's the minority. It matters for all voters.
So the next question is about partisanship and civility. At a national level, we seem to see negative partisanship driving people to or away from the polls. Even when they go to the polls, they're doing so quite often out of a fear and loathing of the other party. What would you do as a legislator to make sure that kind of situation was minimized in Indiana to work in a civil, respectful, and bipartisan way?
Well, certainly I try to set an example myself and not attack people personally. For example, if you look at right now what I'm doing, commercials, ads, all those things, there's nothing, I won't attack my opponent. I like my opponent. I don't have anything to say negative about him. But I think the gerrymandering thing would help. I think that reduces partisanship. I also think term limits. I've signed a pledge that I would only serve 2 terms at the maximum. And I think if we have a recurring new ideas, new voices in the legislature, I think that would help reduce the partisanship. And finally, it is your personal example, how you conduct yourself. You have to be respectful of other people, and if you are, people will see that. They'll know.
Thank you, Senator Bohacek.
Sure. Everybody talks about reaching across the aisle. Well, at the State House, there's multiple aisles. You have the R's, you have the D's, but then within each caucus, there's segments that don't always necessarily agree. So you have to work with the entire body to try to be successful, and we've been fairly successful. And my legislation proves it. It's typically, it's always bipartisan support, and it's represents the district, and the district is fairly split down the middle. It just simply comes down to just treating each other with the same respect and dignity that you want to be treated yourself. And if we do that, that's an important thing. And I want to thank Mr. Davis publicly. His caucus issued just a scathing personal attack press release against me, and after much outcry from some folks in the district, they pulled it back. But I want to thank Mr. Davis for not running with that and also pulling it back as well.
Thank you. I don't think we need a rebuttal on the issue of civility, and we are at the time to go to closing statements. And based on a coin toss, we will start first with you, Mr. Davis, 60 seconds.
I thought it was 30 seconds.
30 seconds,
okay,
yes.
I'm sorry, okay. First of all, I want to thank all of you. If you sat here for an hour and listened to our debate, thank you so much. It's kind of you to do, and all the people that put this on. It was a great thing, great experience for me, very much a learning experience. If you want to talk to me more, go to davisforsenate.com. Our campaign headquarters, if you want to call there Monday through Friday, 219-326-7777. Maybe we didn't talk about something today, or there's something else you'd like to cover. Be more than happy to do that. Sorry, I'm all done. Thank you.
Senator Bohacek.
Sure. So once again, I'm easily reachable. You can email me at mikeinsenate@gmail.com or contact me at 219-861-6399. We have a lot of more important work to do at the State House. There's a lot of things that need to be resolved and addressed, and we need to keep bringing back the resources back into the district like we've done in the past.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank both of the candidates who agreed to debate here. Not all candidates do, and that shows real courage and a commitment to you, the voters. And so I applaud both candidates and encourage everybody to get informed and get out and vote on or before November 3rd. Thanks for watching. On behalf of the American Democracy Project and the League of Women Voters, I'm Elizabeth Benyon, reminding you that it takes all of us to make our democracy work.